The Unfolding Tapestry of Liberation, a narrative of self-discovery and domestic revolution. The words tumbled from her lips with a cadence so deliberately cutting, it could have effortlessly sliced through the thickest pane of reinforced glass, each syllable dripping with that particular amalgamation of condescending mockery and self-satisfied arrogance that only those individuals who either possess genuine confidence or mask profound insecurity can so effectively muster. "Cease this pretense that we are bound together by any form of matrimonial commitment," she declared, her mouth curling into a smirk that remained stubbornly disconnected from the cold calculation in her eyes. "You possess absolutely no authority whatsoever to interrogate my movements or scrutinize the company I choose to keep for my personal enjoyment." Her utterance remained suspended in the atmosphere like noxious smoke following the abrupt termination of a firecracker, pungent, persistent, and utterly impossible to disregard or ignore. A chorus of shrill, high-pitched laughter immediately erupted around her, each note ascending in both pitch and cruelty like a startled flock of birds suddenly taking flight from a tranquil pond. This was not merely amusement, it was a meticulously choreographed performance, a theatrical exhibition of derision specifically designed to humiliate and diminish. The three women flanking her, her loyal entourage, her devoted coven, her personal Greek chorus of sycophants, clutched their midsections, doubling over as if their rib cages might fracture under the immense pressure of their mirth. One meticulously wiped away a tear forming at the outer corner of her eye. Another expelled a snort that sounded remarkably like a balloon rapidly deflating after being punctured. I stood motionless in that very moment, a wooden utensil gripped firmly in one hand, a pot of simmering tomato-based sauce bubbling gently upon the stove behind me. Crimson droplets of liquid slowly dripping onto the cool ceramic tile floor in thick, deliberate patterns. And yet, I did not react. Not with anger, not with protest, not even with the faintest flicker of visible disappointment or emotional disturbance. Instead, a profound stillness settled over me, a kind of inner quietude, a clarity so pure and unadulterated it felt almost spiritual in its intensity. It was as though, in that singular crystallized moment, something deep within me had snapped, not with a violent, jarring crack, but with the soft, final click of a door closing with absolute finality. The segment of my soul that had been desperately striving to make logical sense of this increasingly dysfunctional relationship, to locate some semblance of rational explanation for the emotional chaos, had simply ceased its efforts. My girlfriend Jessica and I have maintained what could only be described as a fundamental, irreconcilable disagreement regarding the very nature of objective reality as it pertains to our shared existence. I firmly believe that if one resides within another person's dwelling, consumes their sustenance, and utilizes their wireless internet connectivity without contributing financially or otherwise, one is inherently participating in a form of partnership, whether formally recognized or not. Jessica, however, operates under the delusion that she exists as some sort of celestial body of immense gravitational influence, while I am merely a small, insignificant planetary object hopelessly caught within her overwhelming gravitational pull, destined to orbit her forever without any meaningful input or autonomy. Our association has endured for precisely 2 years, and for the most recent 6 months of that duration, she has been residing within my private residence. My legal designation appears prominently upon the mortgage documentation. My signature graces every utility bill that arrives through the mail slot, and my chosen surname is engraved upon the small decorative plaque affixed beside the front entrance that declares The Wilsons. A purchase she executed without consulting me, and which now appears wildly, almost comically optimistic given our current circumstances. I characterize myself as a remarkably easygoing individual, someone who genuinely appreciates the simple pleasures of a quiet, uncomplicated existence. My professional occupation involves working remotely as a graphic designer, creating visual content for various clients from the comfort of my own home office. I maintain a small circle of genuinely good friends whom I value deeply, and my concept of an exceptionally exciting Friday evening typically involves experimenting with a novel brand of frozen pizza purchased from the local supermarket. Jessica, however, operates under an entirely different paradigm altogether. Her entire existence appears to function as a continuous performance, with her primary audience consisting of her three closest companions, a cackling Greek chorus whom I privately and somewhat uncharitably refer to as the Harpies. Their designated names are Tiffany, Brittany, and whatever the third individual's actual designation happens to be. For the sake of narrative convenience, I shall simply refer to her as Chardonnay, as that seems to capture her essence quite adequately. The central conflict that ultimately precipitated the dramatic events I'm about to recount came to a head last weekend. I was engaged in the mundane yet satisfying activity of preparing dinner when Jessica glided into the kitchen, her mobile communication device pressed firmly against her ear, already attired in what she considered appropriate evening wear. She was in the midst of a loud, one-sided conversation with her aforementioned companions, the Harpies. "Oh, my absolute God, yes, I am completely and utterly in," she declared into the device, her voice rising with artificial enthusiasm. "A weekend excursion away from all responsibilities is precisely the therapeutic intervention I require at this moment." She paused briefly, listening to the unheard response from the other end before continuing. "No, he is most certainly not accompanying us. That would be utterly ridiculous and completely inappropriate." She terminated the connection and turned toward me, her face illuminated with what she clearly believed was a radiant, winning smile. "Excellent news. The girls and I have secured plans to visit the lake for an extended weekend getaway. Our departure commences tomorrow morning without delay." This revelation represented the very first instance I had become aware of this particular arrangement. "Oh, I see," I responded calmly, continuing to stir the pasta sauce with measured, deliberate movements. "That sounds rather pleasant. Might I inquire as to which specific lake you all are intending to visit?" It was a straightforward logistical question, precisely the sort of inquiry a reasonable person within a healthy, functional relationship might naturally pose. Jessica, however, regarded me as though I had just requested she explain the most complex principles of quantum physics using only the vocabulary of ancient Greek. She emitted a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark than genuine amusement, and pivoted toward her friend Tiffany, who had just entered through the front door. "Can you possibly believe the audacity of this individual?" Jessica exclaimed, rolling her eyes with theatrical exaggeration. "He actually wants to know the precise geographical location of my weekend retreat." Tiffany responded with a dismissive scoff, examining me from head to toe with the detached scrutiny one might apply to a piece of outdated furniture under serious consideration for disposal. Jessica then redirected her attention toward me, positioned her hands firmly upon her hips in what I can only describe as a confrontational stance, and delivered the statement that would undoubtedly echo through the corridors of history, or at the very least through the immediate trajectory of my personal future. "Cease this pretense that we are bound together by any form of matrimonial commitment," she declared with absolute finality. "You possess absolutely no authority whatsoever to interrogate my movements or scrutinize the company I choose to keep for my personal enjoyment." The Harpies, who had all congregated within my kitchen by this juncture, erupted into unrestrained laughter. It was a veritable symphony of derision, a carefully orchestrated chorus of mockery. They genuinely appeared to believe this represented the absolute pinnacle of comedic brilliance. A man within the sanctuary of his own home, being explicitly informed he holds no legitimate right to pose a simple, reasonable question regarding his live-in companion's planned itinerary. How utterly hilarious they found this scenario to be. I simply remained stationary, clutching a wooden spoon with tomato-based sauce steadily dripping onto the cool ceramic tile floor. And I did not become angry. I did not engage in argumentation. A peculiar zen-like calm washed over me, a tranquility so profound it felt almost otherworldly. The section of my cognitive processes that had been tirelessly endeavoring to make this increasingly problematic relationship function effectively just metaphorically packed its diminutive suitcases, donned a tiny hat, and quietly departed the premises without so much as a backward glance. I observed her smug, self-satisfied countenance, and I merely returned the gesture with a smile of my own, a broad, amicable, yet utterly vacuous expression. You know what? I inquired, my vocal delivery brimming with cheerful agreement. You are entirely and completely correct. My profound apologies for the misunderstanding. They all chuckled once more, interpreting my response as mere capitulation and submission. Jessica bestowed upon me a condescending little pat upon the cheek, and then they collectively swept out of the residence, departing for some pre-weekend getaway cocktail gathering. I remained standing within the kitchen for an extended duration, the silence broken only by the gentle bubbling of the tomato-based sauce upon the stove. Very well, I articulated to myself, a novel and significantly more intriguing strategic plan beginning to crystallize within my consciousness. Not married, no authority to question. Understood completely. The weekend was going to prove enjoyable after all, just not for her. Update 1 commenced precisely the moment Jessica's vehicle, presumably packed with 5 distinct varieties of glitter and an entire case of rosé wine, disappeared down the street on that Friday afternoon. I immediately sprang into action with purposeful determination. My initial tactical maneuver did not involve packing or cleaning activities. Rather, it constituted a mission of critical strategic importance. I proceeded next door to Mrs. Gable's residence without delay. Mrs. Gable represents an octogenarian widow possessing a sweet, grandmotherly smile, a prize-winning rose garden that consistently garners accolades at regional horticultural exhibitions, and an informal surveillance network that would undoubtedly make the Central Intelligence Agency envious in its comprehensiveness. Absolutely nothing transpires upon our residential street without her acquiring knowledge of the event in remarkably short order. I transported a slice of the lemon confection she particularly favors and seated myself beside her upon her front porch. Mrs. Gable, I commenced after we had sufficiently discussed meteorological conditions and the perceived moral deficiencies exhibited by the neighborhood squirrel population. I find myself confronted with a rather delicate situation, and I require your invaluable assistance. It involves a modest theatrical production of sorts. Her eyes immediately illuminated with unmistakable excitement. The woman possesses an affinity for dramatic situations that exceeds even her profound affection for her prize-winning roses. I proceeded to explain the recent developments in meticulous detail. I recounted Jessica's exact phrasing without embellishment. Cease this pretense that we are bound together by any form of matrimonial commitment. You possess absolutely no authority whatsoever to interrogate my movements or scrutinize the company I choose to keep for my personal enjoyment. I found no necessity to exaggerate or enhance the narrative. The unadorned, unvarnished truth proved damning enough in its purest form. By the time I concluded my explanation, Mrs. Gable was patting my hand with a countenance displaying unmistakable righteous fury. "That shameless little hussy," she declared with absolute conviction. "Do not concern yourself, Thomas. You may entrust this matter entirely to me. What precisely constitutes my assigned role within this production?" I provided her with a straightforward script. When Jessica inevitably returned and discovered herself locked out of the residence, Mrs. Gable was to feign confusion and deliver several crucial pieces of information with appropriate dramatic flair. Mrs. Gable embraced this task with the unrestrained enthusiasm of a seasoned Broadway actress preparing for opening night on the Great White Way. With my trusted accomplice properly secured and briefed, I returned to my own residence to initiate what I internally designated as Operation Bachelor Pad Resurrection. For the preceding 6 months, my domestic space had transformed into a veritable sea of beige-colored cushions, pointless little containers that served no practical purpose whatsoever, and decorative artwork that appeared as though a printer had catastrophically run out of ink halfway through the printing process. It was unequivocally time to reclaim my territory and restore my living environment to its original state. I did not merely pack Jessica's personal belongings. I curated them with meticulous attention to detail. I acquired numerous cardboard containers and a thick black permanent marker. The first container received the label Everyday Apparel. The second bore the designation Elegant Attire for Sophisticated Social Engagements, to which I was not extended an invitation. The third, and my personal favorite, was marked Enchanting Shimmering Garments, that inexplicably shed microscopic particles of glitter upon every possession I own. Her collection of 37 pairs of seemingly identical high-heeled footwear was placed into a container labeled "A Podiatrist's Recurring Nightmare." Her mountainous accumulation of cosmetic products and skincare regimens was systematically packed into containers marked "facial pigments" and various unidentifiable substances. By Saturday morning, every tangible trace of her physical presence within my residence had been systematically boxed and organized. I engaged the services of two individuals through a digital moving application, and together we efficiently loaded everything into a 10-foot by 5-foot storage unit located at a nearby facility. I prepaid for 1 month of storage, a generous non-marital gesture I considered it to be. With the house completely cleared of her personal effects, the genuine transformation began in earnest. I embarked upon an extensive shopping expedition. I carefully rolled up the beige-colored floor covering and replaced it with an artificial turf rug that bore a striking resemblance to a professional football field. I sold her sterile white upholstered seating arrangement online and purchased a massive black leather reclining sofa featuring approximately 16 cup-holding receptacles. Her melancholy minimalist coffee table was replaced by a vintage pinball machine discovered through an online marketplace. It did not function properly, but it illuminated beautifully when powered on, and that represented the essential criterion. The bedroom renovation followed immediately afterward. I removed the peculiar macrame wall hanging she had suspended above the bed and substituted it with a framed poster depicting a grizzly bear successfully capturing a salmon within its powerful jaws. It felt entirely appropriate and fitting. My final and most inspired strategic maneuver occurred on Saturday afternoon. I drove to the local animal shelter with no specific intention other than casual observation. An hour later, I returned home accompanied by a 120-pound St. Bernard puppy, whom I named Gus. Gus was decidedly not a small canine. He represented a furry, drooling, lovable wrecking ball of affection and enthusiasm. He immediately claimed the new leather sofa as his personal territory and collapsed into deep slumber, emitting snoring sounds reminiscent of a professional lumberjack after a hard day's work. The residence underwent a complete metamorphosis. It was no longer a sterile showroom exhibiting a sad, beige-colored lifestyle. It had transformed into a fortress of glorious, unapologetic bachelorhood, a sanctuary reflecting my authentic personality and preferences. I spent the remainder of the weekend engaged in activities such as playing fetch with Gus, consuming beer directly from the bottle within my own living space, and systematically changing all digital account passwords. The newly established wireless internet network received the designation "Get Your Own Wi-Fi," and the corresponding password was set to "Not Married LOL." On Sunday evening, I positioned myself upon my 16-cup holder sofa with Gus's enormous head resting comfortably within my lap, and patiently awaited the inevitable confrontation. The storm was approaching with certainty, and for the first time in an extended duration, I experienced a profound sense of complete, utter preparedness. Update 2 materialized on Sunday night at approximately 9 o'clock in the evening, when my video doorbell transmitted an urgent notification to my mobile communication device. There she stood, Jessica, appearing tanned and refreshed from her weekend excursion to the lake, strolling confidently toward my front entrance while humming a cheerful melody. The comedic sequence commenced almost immediately. She attempted to utilize her key. The metallic instrument slid smoothly into the locking mechanism but refused to rotate. The newly installed deadbolt I had positioned that very morning was performing its designated function admirably. She manipulated the key with increasing frustration, a look of mild annoyance forming upon her countenance. She repeated the attempt once more. Then she expelled an exasperated sigh and commenced banging upon the door with considerable force. From his position upon the sofa, Gus lifted his massive head, emitted a deep, rumbling woof of acknowledgement, and then promptly returned to his peaceful slumber. Jessica initiated contact with my mobile device. I observed it vibrating upon the surface of the pinball machine, took a calm sip of my beer, and selected the decline option with deliberate precision. She attempted contact once again. I declined. This cycle repeated itself 5 times in total. The percussion upon the door escalated in volume and intensity. "Thomas, open this door immediately," she demanded. "What precisely is malfunctioning with your cognitive processes? My tea preparation apparatus isn't functioning properly." I maintained absolute silence. This sequence represented an integral component of the carefully orchestrated performance. Following another 5 minutes of increasingly frantic pounding, she appeared to surrender temporarily. The doorbell camera revealed her pacing anxiously upon the porch, running her hands repeatedly through her hair in visible distress. Then, precisely according to schedule, a porch light flickered to life at the neighboring residence. It was Mrs. Gable, attired in her comfortable housecoat and holding a watering can. "Showtime!" she whispered with evident excitement. "Oh, Jessica, dear, is that truly you?" Mrs. Gable called out, her vocal delivery achieving a perfect balance between feigned surprise and neighborly concern. "Mrs. Gable, thank goodness," Jessica responded, rushing over to the edge of my porch. "I am completely unable to gain entry. My key is malfunctioning. Is Thomas present? I can clearly observe illumination emanating from within the residence." "Oh, Thomas is certainly home," Mrs. Gable affirmed, nodding with sage-like wisdom. "He has experienced the most wonderful weekend. A genuine transformation has occurred." Jessica's expression registered complete confusion. "Transformation? What precisely are you referencing?" she inquired with growing concern. "Well," Mrs. Gable began, leaning conspiratorially upon her porch railing, "he shared the excellent news with me. He explained that the two of you are not married. He emphasized that he possesses no authority whatsoever regarding your activities, so he decided to celebrate his newfound freedom accordingly. He completely redecorated the entire residence. It now represents a genuinely masculine environment," he stated, "quite rugged and authentic." Jessica simply stared, her mouth hanging open in undisguised shock. "And the most delightful aspect," Mrs. Gable continued, barely containing her visible glee. "He acquired a canine companion, a magnificent, beautiful male specimen named Gus. He expressed his desire for a companion who demonstrates unwavering loyalty and refrains from verbal contradiction. Isn't that absolutely charming?" The expression upon Jessica's face constituted a masterpiece of utter disbelief and dawning horror. She slowly pivoted and peered through my living room window with growing apprehension. From my advantageous vantage point upon the sofa, I observed her face pressed against the glass. Her eyes widened dramatically as she absorbed the scene before her. The football field rug, the illuminated pinball machine, and the enormous snoring Saint Bernard occupying what she had previously considered her spot upon the new sofa. She emitted a sound that existed somewhere between a blood-curdling scream and a heart-wrenching sob. She rapidly retrieved her mobile communication device and commenced texting me with furious intensity. My phone illuminated with what could only be described as a novel's worth of angry messages, composed entirely in capital letters. That was the precise moment I determined it appropriate to respond. I transmitted a single, straightforward text message. "You instructed me to cease acting as though we were married. You declared I possessed no authority. I concur entirely. This is my residence, and you hold no authority regarding how I choose to inhabit it. Since we are not married, I have returned your non-marital possessions to a secure storage location. The address is 123 Storage Way, Unit 42. The access code is 12234. You possess precisely 1 month to retrieve your items. I wish you the very best in all your future endeavors." I then proceeded to block her communication number without hesitation. The doorbell camera displayed her reading the text message. She glanced at her phone. She peered at the window. She examined her phone once more. Then she unleashed a scream of pure, unadulterated rage and hurled her mobile device onto my front lawn with considerable force. It represented a truly spectacular emotional meltdown of unprecedented magnitude. She continued ranting and raving for an additional 10 minutes before Tiffany, the designated harpy, arrived to collect her. The subsequent day initiated the anticipated social media campaign that followed predictable patterns. Vague posts emerged concerning betrayal, discussions about men who allegedly cannot handle strong, independent women. It was profoundly pathetic in its execution, but I retained one final strategic card to deploy in this unfolding drama. Final update. The social media theatrics proved entirely predictable, yet simultaneously incredibly tedious and uninspired. Jessica and the Harpies published stories accompanied by melancholic musical selections, pontificating about the critical importance of understanding one's intrinsic value and eliminating toxic energy from one's life. It was all so generic and unoriginal that it bordered on the comical. They were attempting to portray me as some sort of villainous antagonist, yet they were utilizing what amounted to a paint-by-numbers kit in their efforts. I permitted them to continue this charade for approximately 2 days before deciding to provide some much-needed contextual clarification. I did not engage with them directly through public channels. Instead, I created a post upon my own private social media platform, visible exclusively to our mutual acquaintances. It manifested as a photographic album. The initial image depicted my living room from approximately 1 month prior. The depressing beige-colored sofa, the pointless decorative bowls, the general atmosphere reminiscent of a dentist's waiting room. The accompanying caption read simply, "Before." The second photograph showcased my living room in its current state. The glorious leather reclining sofa, the football field rug, the brilliantly illuminated pinball machine, and Gus the St. Bernard sprawled out majestically upon the furniture. The caption declared, "After." The final picture constituted a selfie featuring myself, and Gus seated comfortably upon the sofa. We both appeared incredibly content and at peace. The caption was refreshingly straightforward. Decided to redecorate based on my revised relationship status. It was brought to my attention that I am not married and possess no authority regarding various matters, so I am enthusiastically embracing my newfound freedom. Bachelor Pad Dodge is my co-pilot. No say no stay. The post functioned as a nuclear detonation within our social circle. The sheer unadulterated pettiness of the gesture, when combined with the undeniable cuteness factor of Gus, created a winning combination that resonated powerfully. My circle of friends found the entire scenario absolutely hilarious. The narrative, now presented with the appropriate context, spread with wildfire-like speed through our community. Individuals who had initially offered sympathy to Jessica were now gaining access to the complete picture. The prevailing storyline was no longer psycho boyfriend ejects, girlfriend from residence. Rather, it had transformed into girlfriend explicitly informs boyfriend that their relationship constitutes a joke, then experiences profound shock when he actually believes her statements. Jessica's companions fell into conspicuous silence. It proves remarkably challenging to maintain a victim narrative when the alleged villain consistently posts adorable photographs with his enormous, lovable canine companion. The aftermath for Jessica proved rather difficult to navigate. She initially took temporary residence with Tiffany, but that arrangement reportedly lasted less than 1 week. I subsequently learned that Tiffany grew weary of Jessica's constant complaining and her complete failure to contribute financially toward shared living expenses. Jessica ultimately found herself compelled to relocate and reside with her parents in a town situated approximately 3 hours away by automobile. She did attempt to pursue legal action against me through improper channels. I received a formal letter from a legal representative demanding immediate access to the residence for the purpose of retrieving what they termed wrongfully withheld personal property and requesting financial compensation for being rendered homeless through alleged malicious intent. My legal counsel responded with a copy of my mortgage documentation, a copy of the lease agreement, which featured only my name as the sole signatory, and a politely worded inquiry regarding whether Jessica intended to reimburse me for the 6 months of rent, utilities, and sustenance she had consumed while residing within my home as a non-married person with no obligations whatsoever. We never received further communication from her legal representative. The most amusing segment of this entire ordeal occurred approximately 1 month ago. I was visiting the local dog park with Gus. He was happily engaged in chasing a tennis ball while I conversed with another canine owner. A woman approached me hesitantly, displaying visible discomfort. It was Chardonnay, the third harpy. She appeared incredibly awkward and ill at ease. "Hey, Thomas," she began tentatively. "Look, I merely wanted to express my sincere apologies regarding that evening at your residence. We were significantly out of line with our behavior." I simply shrugged in response. Jessica stated precisely what she stated. I merely accepted her words at face value. "Yeah, I comprehend," she acknowledged, shaking her head with visible regret. "She is quite a lot to handle. She contacted me last week complaining that her parents are compelling her to secure employment. She attributed this unfortunate circumstance entirely to your actions, claiming you ruined her life." She paused momentarily before directing her gaze toward Gus, who was currently attempting to fit 3 tennis balls simultaneously within his mouth. "Honestly," she continued, "it appears as though you are managing exceptionally well under the circumstances." And she was entirely correct. I am indeed managing exceptionally well. The residence is no longer a beige-colored prison of enforced conformity. It is transformed into my authentic home, a space that genuinely reflects my personality and preferences. The pinball machine still does not function properly, but it serves as an excellent conversation piece during social gatherings. And Gus represents the absolute best roommate I have ever experienced. He demonstrates unwavering loyalty, possesses an inherently humorous disposition, and never complains about my culinary efforts, no matter how experimental they might become. I acquired a profoundly valuable lesson through this entire experience. Sometimes the most effective form of retribution isn't some grand, elaborately complicated scheme requiring months of planning and execution. Rather, it can be as simple as attentively listening to what people explicitly state and genuinely believing them when they speak. Jessica articulated with absolute clarity exactly who she was and what our relationship represented within her personal framework. I simply decided to concur with her assessment without reservation. She declared that I possessed no authority. And now, within the context of her life, I genuinely possess no influence whatsoever. And within the framework of my existence, she similarly holds no power or significance. And when this philosophical realization combines with the companionship of a giant, drooling canine companion, it constitutes what I would describe as a rather happy conclusion to an otherwise challenging chapter in my personal narrative.